Hi everyone, so we're going to move on to a next part of our biomes unit where we're going to be talking about aquatic biomes. So we're going to be talking about different types of aquatic biomes here. So as we know, our Earth is covered in 75% of water between our oceans, our lakes, ponds, rivers, all of that incorporates into that 75%. So if we want to start by describing our aquatic biomes, we should talk about our salinity levels. So let's review. Our salinity is the amount of dissolved salt in our water. So it talks about the salt content that we're going to see. So 3 different ecosystems that we can be classified as saltwater, freshwater, or brackish water. That's 3. So those are the 3 different ones that we can see, and these are all dependent on the amount of salinity that we can find in those waters. So photosynthesis can be limited because we know what we need for photosynthesis is light, water, and carbon dioxide. So if there's a limited light availability, that means there's going to be limited photosynthesis. So depending on the water clarity and the depth of the water, we're going to see more or less photosynthesis occurring within those aquatic plants there. We also see that our aquatic ecosystems can either be flowing or standing. So what that means is if we're flowing, we're moving. But if we're standing, it's very still. So something maybe like a lake would be more standing water, where a river is more flowing water. And we can divide these aquatic ecosystems into different zones, and we're going to talk about what these mean in a second. So we have photic zone, an aphotic zone, and a benthic zone. I don't know why it's not letting me underline it. There you go. So those are the 3 different zones that we'll see here with our aquatic ecosystems. So if we take a look at our freshwater ecosystems, those involve lakes, ponds, inland seas, rivers, all those different things. And what classifies those as freshwater is that the salinity is less than 0.5 parts per thousand. So that's just the measurement of how we do salinity. So when its salinity is less than 0.5, we can see that this is a freshwater ecosystem. A little bit different, you can see here are benthic zone, aphotic zone, and photic zone. So what that's going to mean is our photic zone is going to get more light, photo, light, aphotic, not as much light or no light. And then our benthic zone is just the bottom of that area, so the sea floor per se. But our ponds and lakes are going to be a little bit different because they're going to be divided horizontally rather than vertically into these 2 zones here, our littoric zone and our limnetic zone. So if we look at our littoric zone, it's this zone that kind of where the water meets the land here, where our limerick zone is just the water zone here. So those are the 2 differences between what we would see are zones in ponds and lakes here. So if we get right into the different types of freshwater ecosystems that we're going to see, we can see wetlands is going to be our first one. So how do we define wetlands? They're areas that land is flooded for at least part of the year. So if we've ever seen in the winter, some of these ponds or little lakes that we see are dried up. These would be considered wetlands because they're only with water for part of the year. So these are going to include different marshes, swamps, bogs, and fens. And wetlands are really important because they have 4 really important characteristics. They help prevent flooding. They recharge our aquifers, which we know is our underwater water storage. They filter out pollutants in the water, and they provide habitats for many, many different animals here. So if we take a look a little bit deeper into our freshwater wetlands here, we can see there's 2 main types. and these are going to be marshes and swamps. So the difference between here is that marshes are going to contain non-woody plants, and swamps are going to contain woody plants. So what that means, non-woody plants would be like grasses and things like that, where woody plants would be trees and bushes. So those are the two big differences between these two types here. We also see that wetlands are located more in our southeastern United States. So Florida has many wetlands, all those states around there, Georgia, Alabama, a little bit in Texas, and up the coastline too, around Virginia, North Carolina, things like that. So if we take a look, we can see this map all the way down the coast here, around our southeastern border of the United States. So we can see a little bit in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana. All those different places have these freshwater wetlands that we can see. So the important functions that they're going to have for the environment. So one, they're going to act like filters or sponges to remove pollutants from the water. Two, they help control flooding. So they do this by absorbing extra water when our rivers and streams overflow. So that's how they're going to help control flooding. And then three, they provide many homes, so these different habitats for native and migratory wildlife. So if we think of migratory wildlife, we think a lot about birds. So birds that travel from either the south up for the winter, or other places like that. And we also see it's also a good feeding and spawning zone for many game fish. So game fish are those fish that get stocked in different lakes and things like that. So this is where these animals would feed, reproduce, and all those different types of things. Next one we're going to talk about is marshes. So freshwater marshes tend to be found on low, flat lands that have little water movement. So that would be our standing water. In the shallow parts, our roots have very rich bottom sediments, which is going to be really important because it allows our plants to have that really rich soil that they need to grow. And these plants are just going to have little leaves sticking out from the top to get that photosynthesis happening, but the root system is really good because those rich sediments at the bottom of the marshes are very high in nutrients for these plants. So there are also several kinds, and these are going to be characterized by their salinity. So brackish marshes have slightly salty water, where salt marshes contain salty water. So those are the two different kinds that we're going to talk about, brackish and salt marshes. No, that's brackish. This might be a new term for you guys. It just means like a mix of salt and fresh water, but brackish marshes are going to have less salt than salt marshes. Our benthic zone, which we know is the bottom of the ocean or the lake floor of marshes, are very nutrient rich because of those sediments, and they contain plants, decomposers, and scavengers. So when you think of scavengers, you might think of predatory birds, but there are also many other types of scavengers that are around. These are also going to typically attract migratory birds. So birds that move from, find that warmer temperature, so temperate. In our summers and springs, we're going to see birds fly here, and then when it gets cold, we're going to see them fly to our tropical habitats. Last one that we're going to talk about right now is swamps. So swamps occur on flat, poorly drained land, and they're often near streams. And we're going to see the plant life here is dominated by woody shrubs or water-loving trees. So that's how we're going to characterize swamps. Freshwater swamps are an ideal habitat for amphibians. So there's a lot of moisture there, so amphibians like water, though they don't live in it all the time. So it's a good place for them to have both. We're also going to see birds that are very attracted to these areas because of different hollowed trees around there. And then reptiles are the predators of these swamps, eating most and any organism that's going to cross their path. So maybe crocodiles are going to live here, and other different types of reptiles. And that's where we're going to end for today. If you have any questions, make sure we reach out and ask.